Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we're taking a pretty specific look at Canada's 2025 federal budget. But yeah, we're skipping the usual fiscal stuff. Instead, we're diving deep into the technology strategy at its core. The material we've got, it's this really focused analytical report, think executive summary, but designed to tell you not just what happened, but what it actually means for investment, for innovation, that kind of thing. So our mission today is really to unpack what a lot of industry folks are calling a complete about-face in policy. For years, Canadian tech, it felt like there was this background noise, right? Like stagnant sentiment, regulatory uncertainty, always there. And the sources suggesting this budget, it's not just a little tweak. It's a major philosophical pivot. They're trying to move away from that sort of risk-averse approach towards something more like, well, strategic technology, nation building. Big words, I know. But there's a real emphasis on repositioning Canada, especially in areas like deep tech and AI.
Yeah, that shift in philosophy, that intent, that's probably the biggest takeaway here, especially for you listening. If you need to figure out where capital and talent might flow next, I mean, we've had years defined by cost-cutting pressures and, maybe more importantly, this very visible exodus of founders, key talent, mostly heading south to the U.S. So the government seems to be trying to, well, stop the bleeding, hit a big reset button on how it engages with tech, recognizing that the old way, the cautious way, it just wasn't working.
Right, the failure part seems crucial.
Yeah.
Why the big shift now, though? It feels almost reactive, doesn't it? Less proactive.
Yeah.
What was going on that kind of forced their hand?
Well, it wasn't exactly a slow burn realization. It feels more like a sudden, uh-oh, we're running out of time moment. The sources we looked at, they frame this very clearly as an urgent strategic risk window. There are basically three big risks all hitting at once, and this budget is explicitly designed to tackle them. First, there's the real risk of losing AI leadership. Canada's got this amazing academic reputation, right? Montreal, Toronto, Vector Institute, foundational stuff. But that brilliance, it just wasn't translating fast enough into lasting commercial sovereign capabilities. The brains are here, but the companies, the IP, increasingly heading elsewhere. Second, that capital flight and IP relocation, it's picking up speed. You hear it all the time. Canadian founders raise seed money here, but for the big growth rounds. They incorporate in Delaware, maybe move the HQ. They go south or even to Europe looking for capital, sure, but also just clearer rules. Less regulatory fog,
So we sort of invent the cool stuff, the IP, but then someone else builds the big company that actually captures the value and the jobs and the taxes.
That's pretty much it. And the third pressure point is just this massive global competition. This is where the budget kind of looks outwards. You've got the U.S. pouring money into industrial strategy, Europe pushing digital sovereignty, huge funds in the Middle East, Asia. Everyone's investing billions in strategic areas. Sovereign compute, that's huge. Dual-use tech, industrial capabilities. Canada kind of looked around and realized, oh, we might end up just buying tech, not making it strategically.
Yeah, that paints a picture of almost defensive necessity. So given those risks, let's talk about the actual plan. What are they focusing on? This isn't about funding like the next small SaaS app, is it? Seems bigger.
No, definitely not. The focus has really shifted up the complexity ladder, you could say. They're not chasing small, iterative software wins here. The target is large-scale, deep tech, strategically vital stuff. The report identifies 4 key anchor areas. And for each one, the goal is pretty clear. Build national capability. Okay, so first anchor, artificial intelligence and compute infrastructure. This is all about digital sovereignty. The stated goal is to cut down Canada's reliance on foreign hyperscalers, the big cloud providers, mostly US-based, and really boost homegrown innovation. So supporting the local AI scene, helping develop Canadian-specific AI models, and this is critical, actually funding the physical compute infrastructure, keeping Canadian data, well, in Canada.
Right. So if our big advantage is AI talent, we need to build them a powerful sort of protected sandbox to keep them playing here. Makes sense. What about the more immediate national security angle?
That leads right into the second anchor, defense and dual-use technology. This is broad. It covers advanced cybersecurity, modernizing defense capabilities, ensuring we have sovereign capabilities in key components. The strategic thinking is pretty simple. Canada can't afford to just sit on the sidelines in these global strategic tech races.
Okay, dual-use systems. Can you maybe unpack that a bit for listeners?
Yeah.
Because we're not just talking tanks and jets here, are we?
No, not at all. It's where the lines get blurry. Dual use means tech often developed for the commercial world that has really significant military or security applications. Think about Advanced drone software may be built for farming or mapping. That can easily pivot to surveillance. Or AI that optimizes city traffic flow. It could also secure critical digital infrastructure. So by focusing here, Canada is trying to make sure its own industries can serve commercial needs and meet defense requirements without having to import every critical bit.
Right, okay. That sector, though, it's always been tricky. Government procurement, it can be glacially slow. But moving on, the third area, this is one the whole fintech world has been buzzing about, an open banking implementation.
Yes, exactly. This one's very specific, but potentially transformative. It's about moving towards a regulated system for data portability. The basic idea is you own your financial data, not your bank, and you should be able to securely share it with, say, a third-party fintech app if you want to. The goal is to spark way more competition among fintechs, let them offer new, tailored services, and really change how consumers interact with their own banking information.
That does raise security questions, though, right? If data is moving around more freely, how confident are the sources that the privacy and security aspects are properly baked in?
Well, the sources emphasize that the whole point is that it's regulated and standardized. That regulation is specifically meant to enforce really strict security protocols and define liability. Actually, part of the reason it's taken a while to get open banking going is supposedly about getting those robust rules right before opening the floodgates, addressing those privacy concerns up front.
Got it. That makes sense. Okay, and the last pillar, the really big picture, forward-looking one.
That would be the fourth. Deep tech and industrial innovation. This is where the ambition really shows. They talk about pushing Canada into a Tier 1 innovation category, moving beyond just software. We're talking foundational science, hard tech, things like quantum computing, photonics, that's light-based tech, space tech, advanced materials, bioscience. They're clearly trying to leverage existing strengths like, Waterloo and quantum to build national scale in these really fundamental technologies, betting on big leaps, not just small steps.
Wow, okay. That is a fundamental shift in focus. You can feel the ambition there. But, and this feels like the big but in the report, it brings us straight to execution. The sources say tech leaders, broadly welcome the tone shift. That sounds positive.
Yeah.
But announcing policy is one thing, actually doing it is another. Where's the skepticism coming from?
Yeah, this is exactly the aha moment, or maybe the uh-oh moment, where the grand strategy hits the, bureaucratic ground. The enthusiasm for the direction, it's almost completely balanced out by some serious widespread skepticism about the how. The feedback you hear pretty consistently from tech CEOs, VCs, analysts, it boils down to, okay, nice headline shift, we like the sound of it,
Yeah.
but where's the actual detailed operational roadmap?
And it's not just about when, right? It's about the clarity of the whole process. What are the specific friction points industry is worried about?
There are basically four big ones that kept coming up in the analysis detailing this execution gap. First, the most obvious one. Program rollout timelines are just fuzzy. Okay, the money's notionally there in the budget, but when can companies actually apply for that AI grant? When does the first sovereign compute contract actually get signed? Because if it takes the government 18 months just to figure out the program rules, any competitive edge they were hoping for, probably gone. Second, there's just not enough clarity on which specific sectors get priority first within those four big buckets. Like, if I'm an investor looking at a quantum computing startup versus, say, an advanced materials company, I kind of need to know where the government's initial big spending push is going to land. It helps align my own capital.
Right, that's about where the money goes. What about the how? The report mentioned worries about procurement pairing. That sounds potentially painful.
Oh, it absolutely is. This is often where innovative ideas meet a wall of process. The industry is really concerned about this procurement pairing between research labs, often publicly funded, and the private companies that need to scale the tech. If the government wants to be the crucial anchor customer for these new deep technologies, which it needs to be, that procurement process has to be fast and agile. But historically, government procurement is slow, it's incredibly risk-averse, and it's often designed for buying, like, office supplies, not rapidly evolving AI systems or dual-use tech.
So the fear is, the nimble little startup with the breakthrough tech spends 2 years navigating forms and committees, and by the time they get the go-ahead, the tech's already old news.
That's exactly the risk. The speed of procurement is almost as critical as the funding itself in these fast-moving fields. And this is all before we even get to the biggest, most complex piece, the sovereign compute build-out.
Ah, yes, the infrastructure. Tell us more about the concerns there. Financing? Ownership? Who's actually going to own and run these Canadian compute centers?
All right, this is the multi-billion-dollar question,
Right.
literally. And there's a real lack of clarity on how it gets financed and who ultimately owns it. Is it going to be entirely government run? That raises efficiency concerns. Will it be some kind of public-private partnership, a PPP? Okay, if it's a PPP, which private companies get involved? How do you ensure the sovereign part, the data security, the resilience is really baked in and stays that way? Plus, if the hardware itself, the chips are sourced from overseas, how truly sovereign is it at the end of the day? These big structural questions, still pretty opaque.
Okay, that's a significant execution risk. So let's shift to the potential impact, the strategic implications, based on what the sources are saying. If we think short-term versus long-term, what should we be watching for now that this is out there?
Yeah, okay. So short term, thinking the next, say, 1 to 2 years, the signal itself is actually quite powerful and positive. We should probably expect to see, improved optimism, better investor confidence, especially around those four anchor areas: AI, fintech, defense dual use, and compute infra. This policy shift might be strong enough, potentially, to even start luring back some of that Canadian talent that left. And crucially, VCs, corporate innovation arms, they'll likely start to re-rate Canadian startups in these fields, see them as less risky because the government's now signaling strong support.
So that's the sentiment shift, the market reaction. What about the actual payoff? The medium to long term, looking out, say, 3 to 10 years?
Well, here it really feels like a fork in the road, based entirely on whether they nail the execution or not. The report kind of lays out two paths. Path one, if they execute well, quickly, clearly, Canada could actually carve out real global leadership niches, specific areas where we have an edge. Think things like specialized compute infrastructure designed for cold climates that's actually more efficient. Maybe Arctic infrastructure tech, integrating clean energy tech with industry, quantum photonics, specific cybersecurity niches, dual-use systems tailored to Canadian needs. That path makes Canada a creator, an exporter of valuable strategic tech. Path two, if execution gets bogged down, delayed, muddled, well, then the policy just kind of fizzles out. Its competitive advantage gets blunted. And Canada basically risks falling back into that old pattern, being a follower, not a leader in the big global tech waves, mostly buying advanced tech developed elsewhere. Which means those original problems, the capital flight, the brain drain, they just continue.
Okay, so the strategy is set. The market's cautiously hopeful, but it all hinges on delivery. So what should everyone be doing right now? What are the immediate next steps recommended for, say, government, industry, investors?
The recommendations are pretty action-oriented, focused on right now. For the government, the absolute priority has to be defining those measurable timelines. They need clear deadlines for things like when the open banking APIs will be ready, when AI compute grants are actually open for application, how companies access dual-use funding. Intentions need to become concrete milestones fast. For industry and startups, it's about strategic positioning, aligning quickly with those sovereign capability niches. Like if you're building AI models for specific Canadian industries or that cold climate data tech, position yourself clearly to potentially become one of those government anchor customers. And finally, for investors, the advice is pretty clear and time-sensitive. Use this moment right now to actively scout and maybe fund these deep tech opportunities. There's likely an early mover advantage here because the positive story, the government backing, it probably isn't fully baked into company valuations yet. If execution does go well, those valuations could climb pretty fast once the government money actually starts flowing.
That sums up the opportunity nicely. So the 2025 budget, at its core, it really does seem to lay down a new philosophical marker, a shift away from that passive, maybe risk-averse approach towards a much more active strategic technology nation-building model. The tone has definitely changed, and sometimes in policy, changing the tone is the first necessary step.
Absolutely. The tone shift is significant. It sets the stage. But yeah, the closing thought from the analysis really hits that core tension, the one you, the listener, should keep in mind watching this unfold. The success of all this ambition, it hinges completely on execution speed, on clarity around who's eligible for what, and on really tight alignment between government, industry, and academia. Canada's laid out a map for how it wants to build a sovereign tech advantage. The big question now is, can they actually build the house? Or are we just going to see another cycle of, brilliant potential that never quite gets fully realized? That's the real test ahead.
An excellent and maybe slightly worrying point to end on. That's our deep dive for today.